You'll be yeah, Victoria is going to be talking to us about raising trainee teachers' awareness of Eurocentrism and how this impacts upon curriculum design and choice of instruction. I know you very well, Victoria, so I know what I'm going to expect. Yes, so let's give Victoria the chance to talk. And the online audience, we recognize you. We know you're there, and we know you're listening as well. Okay,
thank you for the introduction, Moni. I was excited when I saw the call for the abstracts. It was at a time where I just planned to do this session with the trainee teachers. I have delivered the session, so part of what I wanted to present is obviously some things for you all to take away and think about in your curriculum design and instruction, but also just a reflection on how that went and why that's important when working with teachers of the future. So I am in teacher education, but I come from a science background. So I am now leading the primary science within the ITE. And quite often when I talk about science, and then we were talking about decolonizing the curriculum, these are things that I've heard people say, you know, well, science is just science. Science doesn't discriminate. It's about in terms of race, it's just facts. It's about the world we live in. And, you know, I get how you can decolonize history and English, but not particularly science. And I've heard that quite a lot. And probably at some point, without thinking about it, I've never really questioned science. Obviously, when, you know, a few years ago, when these conversations quite rightly became more apparent in society, you know, I was looking and thinking of my own education and thinking of what I did in history and the books that I read, not so much my subject experience in science. And just to kind of reaffirm the point, does anyone know who these two people are? Anyone? The white guy with white hair is Thomas Edison, and he is famous for this is a test, light bulb, great. And the other guy is Louis Latimer, and he actually is the reason we have the filament in the light bulb, because he invented it. He worked with Thomas Edison, and I had not heard of Louis until I was kind of exploring these ideas. And obviously, as a teacher of teachers, I'm learning as well, and it's a really enlightening process. So just to reaffirm why this is important, and important in schools as well. So with our trainee teachers, the first questions I ask them is, you know, what do you think or know Eurocentrism means? How do you think this links to the teaching of science? And how could this link to decolonizing the science curriculum? And I was met, as I'm sure you're all familiar with an array of silence, mothballs flying across the room. And, you know, we managed to get the word Eurocentrism by breaking it down, but that's kind of where we were at. And these are important questions that we are asking primary school teachers, but they're also important questions we should be asking ourselves in our own curriculum and in our own kind of teaching. And so what I'm going to kind of take you on is a quick snapshot journey of some of the information we provided and the activities that we did. So to begin with, just to make you aware, about 2 years ago, I think I was quite unconsciously incompetent in terms of my knowledge of how I would try to decolonize this science curriculum, because I didn't know about Louis Latimer, and for me, my knowledge of science is based on my science experience in school. So it's that kind of, you know, vicious cycle of you learn something, and especially think back to that first slide, they're the views that I had because science was seen as objective. And it's been a journey, so hopefully you'll see me move on at the end of this this presentation. So why it's important to talk about. Quite often our knowledge science knowledge relied on the knowledge and exploitation of colonialized peoples. This is something that I maybe didn't recognize as much, but we need to ensure that teachers who are training our future generations are aware of. We should celebrate the knowledge that has been around for a long time that we maybe don't teach, and how it interacts with our teaching of science. There's currently quite a few countries that I noticed had more literature in terms of decolonizing the science curriculum, so Canada and Australia, and they were looking at Indigenous ways of knowing, and obviously, not surprisingly, children and students who were from those backgrounds were felt undervalued and not included within some of the subjects that they were teaching, because they were not allowed to bring in their cultures, because it was science and this is how it is. Never mind that their, families, their histories have a lot of wealth of different types of knowledge. So again, this could mean that some of our young learners in primary schools, in universities, feel excluded from some of the things that we are teaching. For example, Sarah, if you have, your examples would fit into that. So that's great. And then, we just talk about science. We don't talk about the Western modern science lens. We just talk about science as a kind of holistic, a homogeneous body of knowledge. So as an educator, it's about talking and recognizing what science is. So quick whistle stop of the history. We had this Enlightenment period in Western Europe, and this was a way of, we were building this scientific method. We were working very systematically, building our science knowledge. This was at a similar time where there was a lot of colonization in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And when, as colonizers, people from from Britain and other countries went to these lands, we used our language to kind of impose it on the colonies that we were colonizing. And we essentially said, this is right, you will learn this and you will talk about this in this language. And so we have works of different scientists that were completely kind of lost and whitewashed from our knowledge and understanding about science. And so we have this Western idea of science. As I said, this idea of the scientific method, and we have truth. But our truth is based on values and ideas. And scientists, now are being like, yeah, there's other ways to know things. But science is the best. We acknowledge there's other ways, but we're going to teach you this anyway. Okay, Indigenous science is still a process that is built on empirical knowledge. It's based on observation. It's based on experience. It's based on that wealth of knowledge that's passed down through generations. And this is still empirical, yet we have this kind of conflict for some people that, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. I understand where you're coming from, but you're going to learn this anyway. And there's some occasions where we will take on some of this. So we might talk about, for example, oh yeah, if you put kind of, I don't know, lemons on some cloth, you will bleach it or you will make it go white. And it's very basic, but we accept this and we use those kind of home truths or kind of hearsay, but it's kind of treated as inferior knowledge. And this was a paper here that I thought was quite interesting. And it talked a lot about how we try and fit science knowledge with the Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous science. Yeah. And we've got the different categories where we go from category 1, where there's things that are happening that align directly. And then there's category 4, where there's no link. So I'm I'm sure hopefully share the slides so you can have a little look there. And just because I've got a minute left, I thought I'd have loads of time. What we did with the trainees is we talked about the concept of time and how we teach time. And to be honest, this is something that we'd never really, I never thought about much when teaching science, but science is based on culture. Science is based on a lot of different beliefs. And when you find out about GMT, and I will wrap up really quickly, it's quite interesting how integrated in the colonies this is. So brief history, we're not going to be able to go through all this, but as you can see there with the trainees, we looked at the wealth of experience and kind of cumulative ideas of how we tell time. And we have GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. We still use that as a universal globally. It's how we fly, it's how we transport things. Yet the time at which we had the observatories, we had a master clock, and then we called them slave clocks in terms of how we accepted the time. So that language as well. And because we mastered time as colonizers, we were able to master the seas. And that's how we were able to kind of, let and organize this atrocious slave trade that happened for hundreds of years. So I'm going to skip that. We're just, sorry, I know I'm over. The example we asked to do then was to plan lessons. And I just want to point you to that last QR code there, because it's an example of in Australia, how they're thinking of planning a curriculum that actually has things that you include, such as the wound. What is the wound we're exploring? What is our history? Why me? Why is it important to everybody? What cultures are we exploring, and what should our response be? So it's a much more culturally and informed curriculum about time. So thank you, and sorry for going over.
Thanks, Victoria.